When we talk about relationships, we are not only speaking about two people in the present, we are also speaking about the invisible threads of the past, the echoes of previous intimacy, and the attachments that don't always vanish simply because the relationship ended. Her availability feels inconsistent and marked by unexplained absences, and at first it might seem like a natural byproduct of a busy life, but when you look closer, you begin to sense that the rhythm doesn't follow the usual patterns of work commitments or ordinary obligations. It feels irregular, unpredictable, and somehow heavy with silence. And in relationships, consistency of presence is what builds trust. It is not just about showing up physically, but also emotionally. And when that presence begins to falter, the partner left behind feels the subtle shift. It is like listening to a song you know well and realizing certain notes are missing. The melody still plays, but something is not quite in tune. These absences are not always dramatic. They can be small enough to question whether they even matter. A sudden delay in response, a cancelled plan without a clear reason, an evening where she is unreachable in ways that feel different from before. And while anyone can have moments of distance, what makes this pattern stand out is the repetition over time. It is not just once, it is not simply twice. It becomes a string of inconsistencies that begin to erode the foundation of security. Relationship and humans are intuitive creatures. We notice when the energy shifts, when the attention we once had freely is now divided. What makes these absences particularly disorienting is that they often come with explanations that do not fully align with reality. Perhaps the reason given feels vague, or the story changes slightly when retold. Perhaps the tone of delivery carries defensiveness, as though the mere act of asking where she was has already been anticipated as a threat. And so you are left not only with absence, but with a sense of being shut out of the truth of her world. And when we are denied transparency, we begin to feel a growing gap between closeness and distance, between what is said and what is lived. It is not simply about physical absence, it is about emotional withdrawal too. You might notice that even when she is next to you, there is a distance in her eyes, a distraction in her touch, a preoccupation that steals her attention away. And while she may smile or engage, it feels partial, as though only part of her is truly present and the rest is elsewhere. These are the absences that hurt the most because they cannot be measured by time, they are measured by presence, and the lack of it speaks volumes. When a person is still entangled in another relationship, especially one with a past lover, the availability they can offer is rarely whole. It becomes fractured because emotional energy is not limitless, it is finite. And when a significant portion of that energy is directed outside the relationship, it creates emptiness inside it. And the partner who receives what remains feels the absence like a hollowing. The more they reach for closeness, the more they encounter moments of unavailability, and this dissonance creates doubt, not just in the relationship, but in the self. Am I imagining this? Am I asking for too much? Am I not enough? Unexplained absences often breed overcompensation in other areas. Because the person may sense the gap, they are creating an attempt to soothe it with sudden bursts of affection, gifts, promises, or declarations. And while these gestures can temporarily mask the inconsistency, they rarely erase it. The partner feels both the sweetness and the bitterness simultaneously. The contradiction between being cherished and being neglected creates confusion, a push and pull that makes it difficult to fully settle into the safety of love. And this cycle is exhausting because the heart is never at rest. It is constantly negotiating the presence and absence of the other. Another dimension to these inconsistencies is the impact on trust, because trust is not lost all at once. It unravels slowly, thread by thread. Every unexplained absence becomes a loose thread that weakens the fabric of connection over time. And once the pattern sets in, the partner begins to anticipate the absences even before they occur. They notice the familiar cues, the evasive replies, the vague explanations. The shift in tone and anticipation is often more painful than the absence itself, because it means one is living in a state of vigilance, waiting for the moment when love will disappear again. What complicates this further is that absence can sometimes feel like rejection, and rejection is one of the deepest wounds in intimate life. When someone you Love repeatedly withdraws, whether physically or emotionally. It touches the primal fear of abandonment, and this fear does not need words to be felt. It lives in the body, in the tightening of the chest, in the restless thoughts that keep you awake, in the constant scanning for signs of disconnection. And when this happens repeatedly, it destabilizes not only the relationship, but also the person's sense of worth and security at its core. The inconsistency of availability speaks to divided attention, divided loyalty, divided desire, and while it may never be openly admitted, the partner feels it in their bones, because love that is whole has a quality of presence that is unmistakable. It is steady, even when imperfect. It is attentive, even when distracted by life. It is transparent, even when mistakes are made. But when availability is fractured by another bond, especially one from the past, it cannot carry the same weight. It is thin, stretched, and unreliable, and the one who longs for true intimacy feels the gap growing larger with every unexplained absence. Ultimately, the signs of inconsistency are not about perfection, because no relationship offers constant presence without interruption, but they are about pattern and energy. They are about whether the absences feel natural or whether they feel hidden, whether they reflect the realities of daily life, or whether they mask the presence of another story unfolding elsewhere. And when those absences accumulate, they become one of the clearest signs that intimacy is being shared beyond the relationship, because love cannot thrive in half. Light, it needs presence, consistency, and transparency to grow. And when those are missing, it reveals that part of her remains tied to another world. She guards her phone and digital life with unusual secrecy, and while privacy is a natural and even healthy part of any relationship, secrecy carries a different weight. Privacy says, "This is mine," but secrecy whispers, "I don't want you to know." And it is in that subtle difference that the unease begins to take root. When someone is still entangled with a past lover, phone often becomes the modern veil behind which that connection hides, because today our devices are not just tools of communication. They are containers of intimacy. They carry conversations, shared laughter, photographs, late-night confessions, and even silence that holds meaning. You start to notice the little things, like how quickly she flips her phone over when a message arrives, how she keeps it on silent or face down at dinner, how she steps out of the room to take certain calls, and each gesture on its own may seem insignificant, but together they create a pattern, a choreography of concealment that signals another presence in her digital world. It isn't only the action itself, but the energy around it, the way the body stiffens slightly when a notification buzzes, the way the explanation for who it was feels rehearsed or defense, if the way the device seems to live as a third presence between you. Secrecy around the phone often breeds distance, because trust thrives in openness and falters in shadows. It isn't about having access to every password or scrolling through every message. It is about the feeling that nothing is being hidden from you, and when that feeling is replaced by the sense of being locked out of a part of her life, it stirs questions. Why the guard? Why the need to shield something so intensely? Why the sudden vigilance over a device that once sat casually on the table? These questions linger even if they are not asked, because the body knows when it is being excluded from intimacy. This secrecy also changes the rhythm of communication between you. Perhaps she used to share her day openly, but now details are sparse. Perhaps she once handed you her phone without hesitation, but now there is tension in even touching it. Perhaps you notice behaviors like deleted call logs, hidden notifications, or apps that are disguised as something ordinary. And while there may be logical explanations for each on their own, when taken together, they build a narrative of concealment that the heart cannot ignore. What makes this even more complex is the emotional reaction that arises when secrecy is questioned instead of reassurance. You may meet irritation instead of openness. You may encounter accusations of mistrust. And so the conversation shifts away from transparency and becomes a conflict about control or suspicion. This deflection is another sign, because it is not the natural response of someone with nothing to hide. When love is clear, questions are met with calm. When love is shadowed, questions are met with defensiveness. The guarded phone also symbolizes something larger. It speaks to where intimacy is being directed. If the most tender words, the rawest confessions, the playful exchanges are being reserved for someone else, then the phone becomes a vessel of divided loyalty. It is not just about messages, it is about where the emotional energy flows, because relationships are sustained not only by physical presence, but by the everyday micro connections, the quick texts, the shared jokes, the little check-ins that say you matter to me. And when these are directed elsewhere, the relationship you share feels emptier. Secrecy can also be intoxicating for the person who keeps it, because there is a thrill in living a double life, a heightened sense of desire fueled by the hidden nature of the connection. What is forbidden often carries more charge than what is openly available, and so the phone becomes both the gatekeeper and the stage upon which that secret drama plays out. This creates a cycle where the very act of hiding becomes part of the seduction, making it even harder to break free from for the partner on the outside. The impact is profound. Secrecy erodes the foundation of safety. It creates doubt, not just about what is happening, but about what is real. The moments of affection become questioned, the words of love feel less solid, the sense of partnership weakens, because intimacy cannot thrive in spaces where exclusion is the norm, and over time this can lead to withdrawal as the hurt partner begins to protect themselves from the pain of being half-loved. At its heart, the guarded phone is not about technology. It is about intimacy. It is about the quiet but powerful choice of who receives the most unfiltered version of her. If you are no longer the one she runs to with her unedited thoughts, if her laughter is being typed out to another screen, if her vulnerabilities are stored in a digital space, you are not invited into, then the relationship is no longer whole, because true closeness is not only measured in physical touch, but in where we choose to reveal our inner lives. This secrecy is one of the clearest signs, because it does not happen without reason. When someone has nothing to conceal, their devices are ordinary extensions of life. When someone has another connection to protect, their devices become sacred, guarded, hidden behind walls of deflection and caution. And for the partner who feels the exclusion, it is a reminder that love cannot flourish in an atmosphere of secrecy. Intimacy required openness, not total exposure, but enough transparency to make the other feel safe and seen. And when that openness is replaced by walls, it is often because there is another presence behind them. Intimacy with you feels distant, distracted, or emotionally divided. And while relationships naturally ebb and flow, there is a difference between the everyday rhythms of closeness and the persistent sense that someone's heart is not fully with you. Intimacy is not only about physical connection, it is about the emotional availability that flows through touch, words, and presence. When that presence begins to feel fractured, when the touch feels mechanical, when the eye contact lingers less, and the mind seems elsewhere, the body can sense the absence, even before the mind begins to name it. This kind of distance often reveals itself in subtle ways. You may notice her lying next to you, yet her energy feels far away. Her body may be close, but her mind is in another space. The conversations that once carried warmth now feel routine or perfunctory. There is an absence of spark, a muted quality to what used to feel vibrant and alive. When she kisses you, it may feel as though she is performing rather than participating. When she listens to you, it may feel as though she is waiting for the moment to pass rather than engaging fully. The essence of intimacy, which is to be seen and received, is quietly replaced by going through the motions. Emotional division can be harder to recognize because it often hides behind the veneer of normalcy. She may still laugh with you, still share the surface details of her day, but when you try to go deeper, when you ask about feelings, fears, or longings, there is hesitation or withdrawal. You may sense she is holding something back, guarding a part of herself that you are no longer allowed to reach. And this withholding is not neutral. It speaks of another emotional investment, because intimacy is like a river. It flows in a particular direction, and when the flow toward you weakens, it often means it is being redirected somewhere else. The distracted quality of her presence can also manifest physically intimacy that once felt spontaneous now feels scheduled or avoided. She may claim exhaustion, stress, or lack of mood, but beneath these explanations there is often a quiet disinterest, not in intimacy itself, but in intimacy with you. The contrast can be striking because you remember what it felt like when the connection was alive, and now the absence feels louder than any excuse. The body knows when it is not being chosen, and the heart knows when it is not being prioritized. This divided intimacy also creates confusion, because she may still perform gestures of love. She may say the right words, offer a smile, touch your hand, but there is a hollowness behind them. They feel rehearsed rather than real. And this is perhaps the most painful part, because it blurs the line between truth and pretense, leaving you unsure of what is genuine and what is simply a mask to cover the absence of deeper feeling. When intimacy becomes performance rather than expression, it leaves one partner feeling unseen and doubting their own perception. The emotional division often extends into daily life. Moments that should be filled with connection instead feel empty. Shared dinners feel like obligations. Conversations turn into exchanges of logistics rather than spaces of closeness. Laughter is rarer, tenderness is sporadic, and what remains is the shell of a relationship rather than the living core. Intimacy is sustained by small, consistent gestures, the leaning in, the asking how you really are, the touch that lingers without needing explanation. When these gestures vanish, it signals that the emotional investment is elsewhere. Intimacy that feels distracted can also show up in comparison. She may seem preoccupied after certain interactions. She may bring up past memories in ways that feel sharper than nostalgia, or she may subtly withdraw when reminded of the past. Her energy oscillates, leaving you unsure which version of her you will receive, the present one or the one still tethered to another story. This inconsistency destabilizes the relationship, because safety in love is built on reliability, and when intimacy feels conditional or divided, the ground beneath the relationship begins to crack. This lack of intimacy is not only about what is missing between you, but about what it suggests exists elsewhere. Desire seeks expression. When it is not directed toward the relationship, it often finds an outlet in another space, and the emptiness you feel is the echo of that redirection. She may not name it, but her distance speaks it, her distracted energy communicates it, her mechanical affection reveals it. It is the silence between words, the half-present smile, absent gaze that gives away where her intimacy is truly flowing. The impact of this distance on the partner, who feels it is profound to be close in body but far in heart, creates a loneliness sharper than solitude, because it is not the absence of someone's presence, but the absence of their investment. You can hold her hand and still feel alone. You can share a bed and still feel abandoned, because intimacy is not defined by proximity. It is defined by the willingness to meet another with openness and vulnerability. When that willingness is given elsewhere, the relationship withers quietly at its essence. Intimacy that feels distant, distracted, or emotionally divided is one of the clearest signs that something remains unresolved, because genuine closeness cannot be faked for long. The body reveals what the heart conceals, and the absence of true connection leaves an imprint that no words can cover. Relationships thrive when both partners choose to show up fully. When one chooses to withhold, redirect, or divide their intimacy, the imbalance becomes undeniable. What remains is a love that feels partial, a bond that feels uncertain, and a partner left questioning why the closeness once shared now feels like an echo of what used to be. She brings up her past relationship more often than expected, and while reminiscing about the past is natural, the frequency and tone in which she does so can reveal more than nostalgia. When someone has truly moved forward, the past becomes a chapter that is acknowledged, respected, and left in its place. But when it is revisited repeatedly, when her stories circle back to that same person, when the comparisons slip into everyday conversations, it signals that the past is not finished. It is still active and alive within her. You may notice that her references to the past relationship arise in subtle ways. At first, it could be the mention of a restaurant they once loved or a song that reminds her of a memory. Then it evolves into patterns of speech where her former partner is woven into stories of her life, almost as though he is a shadow that never left. the room. While it is natural to remember important people in our history, the way she lingers on those details, the frequency with which they appear, and the emotional weight she attaches to them can be telling. It is not the story itself, but the insistence on telling it that reveals what still lingered. Sometimes she may use her past relationship as a benchmark without realizing it. She may compare her experiences now to those of before, highlighting differences, or even pointing out what used to feel better or easier. The danger in this comparison is not just that it undermines the present, but that it shows her mind is still entangled with a dynamic she has not fully released. Intimacy requires presence, and presence cannot exist when energy is continually being invested in what once was instead of what currently is. The tone she uses when mentioning the past is equally revealing. There is a difference between speaking about a former partner with neutrality and recalling them with longing, irritation, or unfinished emotion. When the tone carries warmth, sadness, or bitterness, it shows that her inner world is still processing unresolved threads of that story. If she lights up when mentioning an old memory, if she speaks of that person as though they are still central to her narrative, it suggests that the door between them was never fully closed. And if she speaks of them with resentment or unresolved anger, it too binds her, because hatred is still a form of attachment. The repeated bringing up of the past can also appear in moments of conflict. When issues arise, she may compare her current relationship with the previous one, highlighting ways the past seemed easier or pointing to lessons she claims to have learned from it. Yet beneath these lessons is often a quiet attachment, a loyalty to the memory of how things were, or to the fantasy of what might have been. This is not the same as growth. It is recycling old dynamics and unconsciously carrying them into the present. The act of holding on to the past in this way robs the present of its full potential. When she insists on bringing the past into conversations, it also has an emotional impact on her partner. The sense of always competing with a ghost creates insecurity and doubt, because how can one truly feel chosen if the comparison is constant? The presence of a past lover in conversation is like a third person in relationship, unspoken but powerful. It creates an invisible triangle where attention is split and intimacy is diluted. It is not simply that she remembers the past, it is that she keeps it alive in ways that interfere with the present. This behavior is not always conscious. Sometimes it is the unconscious need to keep a connection alive through stories and memories, because those moments were meaningful, and letting them go feels like erasing a part of herself. But other times it reflects a deeper truth, that the bond is not fully severed, and that intimacy, physical or emotional, may still be exchanged. The fact that she brings it into the present so often is a signal that she is not done living that story, and this becomes a barrier to the one she is supposed to be building now. The persistence of her past relationship in conversation is also a sign of unresolved attachment. People who have moved on may acknowledge their history, but they do not dwell on it. They do not need to keep bringing it into the light, because it no longer holds power. But when the references continue to surface, it reveals where her mind and heart are oriented. Desire and attention go hand in hand, and if her attention still flows toward the past, it means her desire is tethered. Their two intimacy cannot thrive in divided soil, because love requires rootedness. The constant presence of her past in conversation erodes the foundation of trust and closeness. It tells you without words that someone else still occupies a sacred place in her heart. It reveals that the relationship you are building is not two people fully facing each other, but two people standing in the shadow of someone else's memory. It creates the sense that no matter how much you give, there will always be a part of her that belongs to another, and this knowledge sits heavy, because love asks for wholeness, not fragments. Ultimately, when a woman repeatedly brings up her past relationship, more often than expected, it is a mirror of where she still is emotionally. The words become clues, the stories become confessions, the frequency becomes evidence of unresolved ties, and while memory itself is innocent, the insistence on carrying it forward suggests that the intimacy of that past continues in some form. The danger is not only in what is said, but in what it implies, that the present may never be enough because the past is not yet over, and until that door is closed fully, no new beginning can be truly lived. Her emotional reactions seem triggered by things tied to her past, and this is one of the most revealing signs because emotions have a way of surfacing truths that words try to conceal when she reacts strongly to something seemingly small. When her mood shifts quickly in response to a reminder of another time or another person, it often suggests that the past is not just remembered, it is still felt deep within her. We all carry emotional imprints from our histories, but when those imprints dictate present behavior, it shows that the past continues to exert influence. You may notice that certain conversations ignite emotions that feel disproportionate. Perhaps a casual mention of an old neighborhood sparks defensiveness, or a passing reference to a song brings sudden sadness. These are not neutral responses, they are charged with meaning, and the intensity behind them points to unresolved threads of connection. Sometimes the reaction is not sadness but irritation or even anger. When the mere mention of something connected to her past evokes a strong reaction, it reveals that those experiences are not resting peacefully in memory, they are still alive in her present. The way her emotions flare or retreat can also reveal hidden attachments. She may become unusually guarded when you ask about her history, or she may speak with a passion that seems out of place for a relationship supposedly left behind. If someone is truly finished with the past, their tone tends to be even calm or detached. But when emotional energy still surges, whether in longing, bitterness, or defensiveness, it shows that the tie is not yet cut. And what is unresolved in the heart often finds expression in reactions that bypass reason. Triggers from the past can infiltrate arguments as well. You may notice that in conflicts with you, her reactions sometimes feel exaggerated, as though she is not only responding to you, but to something else entirely. An old wound reopened, a memory that lingers just beneath the surface. This is how past seeps into the present. It transforms current interactions into reenactments of old dynamics. She may accuse you of things that echo past betrayals. She may project fears rooted in experiences that came before the relationship becomes a stage on which the past continues to perform itself. Emotional reactions may also betray themselves in silence. Sometimes the absence of response says as much as the presence. When she withdraws suddenly, when her demeanor changes without clear reason, when she seems lost in thought after a seemingly innocent moment, it is often because something inside has been stirred, a memory, a feeling, a longing. These subtle withdrawals tell you where her mind has gone. Even if her body remains with you, emotions have a way of revealing the truth that words refuse to admit. This pattern becomes especially clear when her highs and lows seem tied to external reminders. If seeing a certain place sparks nostalgia, if hearing a name changes her energy, if anniversaries of the past bring mood shifts that she cannot explain, it indicates that she is still tethered emotionally to that story. The body remembers anniversaries, the heart remembers dates, even when the mind pretends to move on. And when those emotional echoes manifest in the present relationship, it shows how alive that bond still is. The significance of these reactions is not simply that they reveal attachment, but that they destabilize intimacy, because when emotions are still so deeply influenced by the past, it becomes difficult to fully invest in the present. One partner feels as though they are sharing space with memories that intrude. Uninvited intimacy requires emotional availability, and availability cannot exist when emotions are constantly pulled into another time and another bond. Reactions that surface become the cracks through which you glimpse the truth of where her heart still resides. It is not only negative emotions that reveal this. Sometimes it is the sudden joy or softness that emerges when she recalls something from before. It can feel like watching someone disappear into another world, a look in her eyes, a shift in her tone, an energy that does not belong to the present relationship. The warmth she feels for those memories may seem innocent, but its persistence signals that the intimacy of that past has not been released. And when joy is still tethered to another time, it leaves less space for it to be fully shared in the present. The challenge in these emotional reactions is that they often come without awareness. She may not even realize how much her responses are shaped by the past, because emotions bypass logic. They arise unbidden, revealing where the heart is still invested. This is why they are powerful indicators. They are not calculated, they are spontaneous, and in their spontaneity they tell the truth while words can be rehearsed. Emotions are authentic in their immediacy, and they speak volumes about unresolved attachments for the partner who witnesses these reactions. The experience can be disorienting. You may question yourself, wondering why small things trigger such disproportionate responses. You may feel as though you are competing with ghosts, because you are not only managing her present emotions, but also the echoes of her history. Creates a sense of instability, a feeling that you are never quite sure what will awaken the past, and when it does you are reminded that it is still alive and still competing for space in her emotional life at its core. When her emotional reactions seem triggered by things tied to her past, it is a sign that the story of that past has not been closed. It is not the memory itself that matters, but the way it continues to shape her emotions, and through them her connection with you. The reactions reveal the presence of unfinished business bonds, not fully severed intimacy, not fully released until those emotional triggers no longer hold power. The past continues to intrude, and the present relationship struggles under the weight of what remains unresolved.